the unhackability of Bitcoin. You have to get your arms around the immutability of Bitcoin and all of the technical properties that Bitcoin has that represents pure value exchange between individuals. Because what is it really? It's a decentralized, hardened, fully transparent spreadsheet. That's what it is. But by the way, what is your bank, Jesse? Your bank is a big glorified spreadsheet with fancy logos. And by the way, this is why the stablecoin legislation was problematic in the country. I'm glad it passed, and I think it was a step in the right direction. But they won't let these guys put yield on them. That's the American Banking Association. Yeah. So the stablecoin guys have a one-to-one backing of your money.
Sure.
Jesse, let me ask them: do the banks have a one-to-one backing of your money?
Anthony Scaramucci's journey into the Bitcoin world is a tale of transformation. Scaramucci, a longtime player in traditional finance and the founder of SkyBridge Capital, spent decades negotiating the competitive world of Wall Street. He stuck to institutional investing best practices, trusted fiat money, and supported the central banking system. He dismissed Bitcoin as a fringe concept for computer enthusiasts, rather than serious investors when it first emerged, much like many of his peers. However, following the COVID-19 epidemic, everything was different. He had to reconsider what he believed to be true because of the constant money printing, growing inflation concerns, and unstable markets. What transpired was a protracted internal dispute that lasted more than a year at SkyBridge. Although the change wasn't simple, Scaramucci had accepted Bitcoin fully. For him, it was about a more reliable and open system, not only about profits. That choice changed his firm's course and his personal beliefs about money, values, and the future of finance. If you're intrigued by bold predictions and deep financial insights, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more engaging content. Thank you for your support and enjoy the video.
Because you mentioned we were institutional investors, we were traditional finance people. This is how delicate it was for us. We debated it for over a year. After COVID, I turned to my friends, my staff, and I said, "Hey guys, we're gonna flip this into Bitcoin and other potential digital assets." You know, for whatever reason, we never got on the Ethereum bug, Jesse. I do own some Solana. It looks like I'm just looking at your visage here. You look like a total Bitcoin maximalist. And by the way, I see myself as even though I own some Solana, I see myself as a Bitcoin maximalist. I just, because of my traditional finance roots, I believe this stuff is going to get tokenized. And I think it's going to run on a blockchain rail system that's going to look like Solana or Avalanche, maybe Sui. Okay, and so I own that because I think that's going to be part of the rail system. If you're, maybe not you, because it looks like all you do is own Bitcoin, but if there were other people, right, exactly. But I mean, people that are going to trade stocks and bonds. They're going to trade tokenized stocks and bonds, and I believe that they're going to be on a rail system. And because of my traditional finance roots, I own some of that. But I'm really from a purist, and I wrote a book. I don't know if I have copies around me, but I wrote a book called The Little Book of Bitcoin. I had the foreword written by Michael Saylor, which really just took people through my personal odyssey and SkyBridge's odyssey into Bitcoin. Starting out as skeptics, not understanding it. Michael Saylor himself admitting that he was a skeptic in the beginning, didn't really understand it. He got there in August, I got there in October. Our two businesses converged. Obviously, he's a little bit more aggressive than me, but
maybe than anyone else on the planet.
Exactly. But I mean, he's the man, and I love him. I think he's been unbelievable for us. I think he's explained it about as well as anybody. He deserves all the kudos and the wealth and the success that he's created, and but he's also been a Sherpa, if you will. He's taken us up the Bitcoin mountain. And I think we have a long way to go here. I think people really still don't understand. Like, you're a Bitcoiner. I go to these Bitcoin conferences, and I try to give the Bitcoin people a newsflash. You're a small group of people. Okay, you think you're the people. You think everyone's into Bitcoin. No. My generation, my demographic, they still, and I repeat, they still don't understand it. My generation, my demographic is still followers of Jamie Dimon and followers of Warren Buffett.
Sure, I was going to say,
and so just imagine if we can penetrate that group of people. Just imagine if we can open them up to the idea of Bitcoin. Now, Larry, of course, what a great story. 2021, I hate Bitcoin. I'm going to make an investment in Circle. Of course, he's done very well with his Circle investment. And then he pivots. So think about the neuroplasticity that you need. I'm told Bitcoin is rat poison. I'm told it's a decentralized Ponzi scheme. I'm told that it's worthless, and yet it's not, obviously. And yet you have to then get your arms around the network, the brilliance of Satoshi's white paper, the unhackability of Bitcoin. You have to get your arms around the immutability of Bitcoin and all of the technical properties that Bitcoin has that represents pure value exchange between individuals. Because what is it really? It's a decentralized, hardened, fully transparent spreadsheet. That's what it is. But by the way, what is your bank, Jesse? Your bank is a big glorified spreadsheet with fancy logos. Okay, that's all it is.
Not censorship resistant, though.
well, exactly. Exactly. Not censorship resistant, not subject to centralized authorities who regulate these banks. And by the way, this is why the stablecoin legislation was problematic in the country. I'm glad it passed, and I think it was a step in the right direction. But they won't let these guys put yield on them. That's the American Banking Association. Yeah. So the stablecoin guys have a one-to-one backing of your money.
Sure.
Jesse, let me ask him, do the banks have a one-to-one backing of your money?
However, Scaramucci thinks that there will be a significant change in the way that money is handled and the flow of capital if these individuals start to fully comprehend Bitcoin. He also highlights fractional reserve banking, a significant issue with our existing financial structure. Banks lend out a lot more money in this situation than they actually have. Now contrast that with fully backed stablecoins such as Bitcoin, where ownership is transparent, safe, and independent of bank trust. Scaramucci envisions a transparent, decentralized, and equitable financial system in the future. According to him, the American Banking Association fought hard to prevent stablecoins from offering yield because doing so would jeopardize their antiquated and faulty business model. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are on course to eliminate financial middlemen, lower friction, and offer consumers direct control over their money, much like the internet eliminated long-distance phone fees. To remain up to date on the most recent developments in Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and the digital economy, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable post notifications.
I don't think they're allowed to. The full reserve banks, I think there's been a struggle in the U.S. to get those approved. Right? There's been a number of efforts, and people want that.
Yeah, it's a fractional reserve banking system, which is subject to a crash every 15 years, which requires governmental intervention. But if you're going to compete against that, and you're going to have full reserve stable coins, what do you think is going to happen? The money's going to flow out of the banking system into full reserve stable coins that are offering you a yield. Okay, and that business model is going away the same way that long-distance telephone calls went away. We can make these calls costless. You and I are talking like George Jetson right now.
Yeah.
And we're doing it costless because you have an internet cable, I have an internet cable. You're on the other side of the world. Okay, and I'm, notice how I said you're on the other side of the world. I'm on the center location of the world, Jesse. So the question is, did the politicians run the thing right? How much money leaked out of the system? Yeah. If you saw the taxes that the people pay here, you'd be like, you remember, taxes should be a price for services. In this country, in this city, they're not. So because if they were putting the money, talk about reserve banking, how much of the tax dollars actually goes into a road or an airport or the infrastructure in the local neighborhoods? And the answer is very little, and it's embarrassing for us, to be honest. It's so hard to say now, Jesse. That's why I'm hesitating. Because I remember our conversations in 2018 and 2019. I'd like to think that we would have made that investment with or without the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe not, though, because maybe the status quo was pretty good. You know what people do, Jesse? When the status quo is pretty good, what do they try to do? They try to maintain the status quo. Yeah. The great leaders, the guys like Jobs, Bezos, they break the status quo. Okay, they don't like status quo. They're like, okay, Steve Jobs did something I always marvel at. He took a very successful piece of equipment called the iPod. Do you remember the iPod?
Yeah.
And he dropped it into the iPhone. And he said, "What did you do that for?" He said, "Well, I had to do that. If I didn't do that, someone else would have done it." In other words, he destroyed his own product, right? He didn't sit on it like Pacific Bell sat on the Yellow Pages. They had the data center and they had the technology to create Yahoo, but they didn't do it because they thought that chopping down 40,000 trees and creating 4-pound phone books dyed yellow because they had done that successfully for 95 years. They thought that was going to continue. You see what I mean? So I would like to say that we were bold enough to do that with or without COVID, but I'm not sure. But if you're making the point that COVID was a catalyst, it was, because you got to see what was going on in the markets, you got to see what was going on in the governments, and you were like, okay, we're drunk driving. We're drunk driving with central bank currency. We're drunk driving with our spending. And this Satoshi Nakamoto computer programming team or computer programmer figured out that he could take the drunk driving keys away from people if he could create adoption. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And also I wanted to be a messenger for that. So there was a combination of things. I remember when I went on CNBC the first time to announce that we made a large, sizable position in Bitcoin, I thought the anchor was like ready to like reach through the screen. I was doing it over like in one of those studio boxes. I was gonna reach through the screen and like, what are you, an idiot? Why are you embarrassing yourself on my network, literally, you know?
Anthony Scaramucci began by describing how, in October 2020, he began his journey into Bitcoin. Before making the decision, they debated Bitcoin internally for more than a year. He took action when the pandemic and the government's monetary response to it revealed significant weaknesses in the financial system. In addition, he wrote The Little Book of Bitcoin, which details his and SkyBridge's journey from Bitcoin skeptics to ardent supporters and includes an introduction by Michael Saylor. Scaramucci stressed that although he adopted Bitcoin later than Saylor, Scaramucci thinks that the majority of people still don't comprehend Bitcoin, particularly those in his generation. Despite their continued criticism of cryptocurrency, many people still have faith in people like Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett. He frequently says to visitors at Bitcoin conferences, "You are a tiny group." He believes there will be a huge potential as more people realize the genuine worth of Bitcoin, particularly institutional and senior investors. Additionally, he attacked fractional reserve banking, which makes the financial system vulnerable to government bailouts by allowing banks to lend out considerably more money than they actually own. On the other hand, banks do not provide transparency or genuine one-to-one value like Bitcoin and fully backed stablecoins provide. He claims that because stablecoins pose a danger to the profitability of the established system, according to Scaramucci, Bitcoin is more than just money. It is a decentralized, transparent ledger that is impervious to censorship and a hardened spreadsheet that eliminates the need for institutional trust. It is a remedy to systemic financial inefficiencies, a tool for freedom, and a breakthrough in value exchange. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable post notifications for future Bitcoin, macroeconomic, and digital asset content. And as always, happy investing.